Hey everybody, this is Gregory Schulz from Shumway, Van and Hansen. So I don't know if it has something to do with the spring or what's going on, but I've had a lot of people coming into my office wanting to start new businesses, and that's spectacular. It's fun to see people putting their ideas and their vision into practice and doing it by operating a new business. So since a lot of that seems to be going on, I thought I'd share a few tips, a few things I've observed with people who are starting new businesses so that if you're starting one, you can get it off on the right foot. The first thing is make sure your new business has what's called an operating agreement. So most people who are starting small businesses incorporate them with the state as an LLC. Technically, it's not incorporated. An LLC is a kind of partnership. But they register them with the state as an LLC, a limited liability company. And the document, which is the rules for a limited liability company, is called an operating agreement. The operating agreement governs who contributes money, who has what responsibilities, how the entity votes, what percentage of ownership all the various parties to the LLC have in the LLC. So the operating agreement is pretty important. And this is why. That when a bunch of people start a company together, everyone is optimistic, everything sounds great, and people don't realize that they may have misunderstandings between all the parties to the company about how the company should be run, who's in charge of it, and most importantly, how money will be distributed when the company turns out to be a fantastic success. Some partners may go in thinking that all money that's made will be distributed right away. Some partners may have the impression that money that's made will be retained and reinvested in the business. So these differences in opinion are vital, that they be worked out ahead of time. And so what the operating agreement does is it spells all that out so that when everyone signs the operating agreement, they know exactly how the business will be operated, exactly how the money will be spent. Now, people often say to me, well, this is my cousin, this is my brother, this is a good friend of mine, we're never going to have a disagreement. And it's not really about that. First, it's always possible that down the road there will be a disagreement, and I've seen it many times where fast friends have fallen into disagreement once a lot of money is involved. But secondly, and perhaps more common, is that the role of the operating agreement isn't so much to force anybody's hand or to be evidence in a lawsuit, but rather it's just to make sure that everybody understands each other very well. Because often sort of kitchen table conversation isn't as comprehensive as it really needs to be for starting a business which is legally conformant and operationally functional. So the first thing, make sure you have an operating agreement. Now, while there are templates out there on the internet, I always think it's best to sit down with a lawyer and talk about what your business is going to do, because your business probably wants to do something which is a little different than the template, and a lawyer can help you get the right language in your operating agreement to reflect the priorities and the particularities of your own business. And frankly, having a lawyer add a few terms to an operating agreement isn't that expensive. So the second thing to be mindful of when starting a new business, never do anything on a handshake. If you're going to hire your cousin to be an employee, do not just describe to your cousin what the terms of his or her employment are and then expect them to get to work. Because what's going to happen is down the road there's going to be a misunderstanding. And misunderstandings can lead to litigation, can lead to lawsuits if parties to the business decide that they haven't been treated fairly. But what really happened was just that there was a miscommunication about who had what responsibilities. The same goes for any suppliers that you have or anyone from whom you're buying product. Make sure that things that you're buying or people that you're selling to, that's done pursuant to a written agreement. Now, it doesn't have to be a formal contract. If it's an employee, I highly recommend you get a formal contract. But if you're just buying or selling something, having written email confirmation of what's being bought and sold, when it's to be delivered, what price is to be paid, how and when it's to be paid, that's excellent. Because then if you deliver the product and the person doesn't pay you, it makes it very difficult for them to say, oh, well, we thought we had 2 months or 6 months or a year to pay for this, or we thought they would finance us. So whenever you're doing anything with your new business, do your very, very best to get it in writing. Employment agreements in particular ought to be written and signed, but for most other activities, make sure you at least have an email to back it up. The third thing, this is a pretty common problem. Once your business gets going, someone might come to you and say, hey, I want to invest some money in your company. Whenever anyone says the word invest to you, you should immediately consult an attorney. And the reason for this is when you're taking investments from people, there are multiple layers of regulation designed to keep the public safe from bad investments. And the idea behind these regulations is this. There are lots of hucksters out there, and I've talked about them before, who will sell anything at all as a security in an attempt to make a buck. And so when someone goes out to you and says, hey, I'd like to invest in you, the moment they say invest, there are two different layers of regulation that you have to watch out for. There's federal regulation run by the Securities and Exchange Commission. That's a federal law enforcement entity. And then there's state regulation, which is in Utah, is run by the Utah Division of Securities. So the moment someone wants to invest, you have to comply with federal regulation and with state regulation concerning investments. Now, don't listen to people who tell you, oh, that doesn't apply to small investments. It absolutely applies to small investments. It applies to all investments. But there are various exemptions from the regulations that have a very minimal burden to comply. So for a lot of kinds of smaller investments, the kinds made by angel investors or by your aunt or your uncle, there are ways to get by with very minimal regulatory filings, but not no regulatory filings. So if someone wants to make an investment in your company, do not try and do that by yourself. There are a number of ways that can go badly, and you can get in a great deal of trouble if you sell an unregistered security. And an investment in your company is almost certain to be a security. So before you accept any investment, talk to a lawyer. Now, if you're just taking a small investment, the compliance process is really easy. There's a short form that has to be filed with the federal government, and in the state of Utah, there are a variety of exemptions that make it so that you don't have to file very much with the state at all. So don't worry that if you're taking on an investor, you're going to have to do a big 1,000-page initial public offering. You're not. But in order to comply with the law, it's really, really important that you make appropriate regulatory filings. So to recap, the first thing to do when starting your business, make sure you have an operating agreement for your LLC that defines everyone's rights and responsibilities. The second thing is don't do anything on a handshake. If you're hiring an employee, get an employment agreement. If you're buying something or selling something, record the terms of the purchase or sale agreement at least in an email, preferably in writing. The third thing is don't take on any investors till you talk to a lawyer, because you don't want to be out of compliance with federal securities law. It's not that hard, but make sure you do it. So that concludes what I have to say to everybody today. Good luck starting your businesses. It's a fun and exciting thing, and I love working with entrepreneurs who are getting new businesses underway. So if you need anything, please give me or my firm a call. But just remember that there are lots of ways to do it right in the beginning, and that's much cheaper than fixing it afterward. Best of luck, and good luck with your businesses.